The basis of all true cosmic horror is violation of the order of nature, and the profoundest violations are always the least concrete and describable. H.P. Lovecraft, Selected Letters. Lovecraftian horror, a subgenre of horror literature named after the author that cultivated the genre in the early 1920s, introduced the philosophy of cosmicism. Cosmicism, similar to nihilism, is the philosophy that within our universe, there is no divine entity that presides over humanity, but rather an empty and cold cosmos, and within this endless space, humanity is insignificant and meaningless. Lovecraft was a science fiction horror author who popularized the subgenre of horror with the creation of the Cthulhu mythos. Lovecraft's rapidly declining mental state heavily influenced his works throughout his career, and his xenophobic mindset is ever present in all of his short stories. He was severely agoraphobic, horribly racist even for the times, prone to night terrors, and suffered from a terrible fear of the ocean. He was raised in a semi-wealthy New England family that instilled within him pride for his proper heritage, a theme that also plays heavily in many of Lovecraft's short stories. Lovecraft lived a sheltered life in his hometown of Providence, Rhode Island, and when he moved in with his wife in a larger city, he was quickly overwhelmed. Finally, he moved back to Providence and isolated himself until his death in 1937. Lovecraft had a strange and delicate mindset, which transferred into his stories. Human fragility is a common theme in Lovecraft's works. The true nature of the cosmos is enough to turn mortal minds to jelly. There are reaches of the universe that humans were never meant to tread, and when that sanctity is violated, then the horrible truth of life is revealed, and the sciences cultivated by humanity collapse in upon themselves. The downfall of humanity is when they begin to meddle with forces that they shouldn't. The egotism of mankind and its scientific advancements are what drive these characters to madness. This dangerous curiosity that drives mankind further into the unknown is what is ultimately their downfall. Cosmic horror was never meant to be adapted into a visual medium like film. The nature of cosmic horror is to subvert the audience's imaginations by characterizing these monsters as indescribable. By giving vague and strange information, the audience is forced to fill in the blanks with whatever they can conceive as the worst possibility. They aren't ever given the chance to create a tangible form for their horror, just a concept. If you show the audience something, immediately you have defined a corporeal form for this figure. It no longer employs the suspense of the unknown. We know what it looks like, and we can easily comprehend its form now. So how do you show a formless monster on screen? The answer is that you don't, or in some cases you do. But each time you show it, it's changed itself in some major way, into something completely different, but still the same. John Carpenter employed this method in the 1982 science fiction horror film, The Thing. The Thing is a remake of the 1951 film of the same name, based on the novel Who Goes There by John Campbell. Carpenter's film focused on the American researchers who discovered the remains of a Norwegian research base, where an alien spacecraft and an alien being were discovered under the ice and unearthed. The alien had broken free in the Norwegian base and killed all of the researchers. Now the American researchers try to hunt down the alien's true form to destroy it before it gets loose into humanity. The film isn't afraid to show the audience the alien creature in full light many times, but even though the monster is given a visualized form, it shifts itself so many times into so many different things that it can't be described. We aren't given any specific details about the alien's abilities, but can surmise that it has the ability to shapeshift into any living thing that it infects or destroys. Each time the alien is revealed, the next time we see it, it's changed itself into something or someone different. Sometimes it grows tentacle-like appendages, and sometimes it grows arachnid-like legs. It seems that every part of the monster is alive, and even decapitating or dismembering it just allows it to evolve into multiple forms. The alien is never explained or reasoned with. It only exists to kill every living thing in its vicinity in the most calculated way possible. The alien isn't a mindless or animalistic killer like Ridley Scott's Xenomorph. It calculates its movements and shifts itself into different forms to not arouse suspicions and to hide amongst its prey. At certain points in the film, the main protagonist, MacReady, goes off on his own, off-screen. It raises the question of whether or not by the end of the film, if he's actually a Thing imposter. We wouldn't even know. The monster instills distrust, which quickly spreads amongst the researchers group and even between the audience and our protagonist. At the end of the film, as he sits in the snow with Childs, he accepts the futility of distrusting one another, and they share one last drink. It's heavily hinted that one of them is a thing imposter, but we never find out which one as the film ends and their fates are left ambiguous. If one of them is truly a thing imposter, the remaining human character would be powerless to stop them, and eventually that monster would be able to reach civilization. It would then be able to assimilate every living thing on the planet. Though we can describe each different form, it isn't easy. Sometimes it's a mass of writhing tentacles and flesh, and other times it's a melted heap of blood and bones. This entity has the ability to destroy an entire planet by assimilating all life on it. It is truly a Lovecraftian monster by definition, and the practical effects that made the monster come to life in the film are directly similar to the aesthetic that Lovecraft coined with the fleshy tentacles and multiple faces and mouths. In 2019, director Richard Stanley released his adaptation of Lovecraft's popular short story, Color Out of Space. The film is fairly faithful to the original, but is adapted into a more modern setting. The film revolves around a strange asteroid that crashed outside of the Gardner family's farm. The asteroid leaks a strange color that seeps into the ground. It begins to affect the land around it and the crops that the family grows. Eventually, these things begin to drastically change into something alien, and the sentient color begins to turn hostile, and even the family begins to mutate and change. This alien color behaves very much like an invasive species, similar to the Thing from Carpenter's film. The color infects and mutates animals and plants alike. It's hinted that it's changing them into the landscape on its homeworld, terraforming our planet to make a new home. The film revolves around the initial impact of the asteroid and how it begins to change the family and their farm. Things escalate very quickly in the film as the finale goes down. The color infects Nathan Gardner, the father, and he kills his wife and children. His daughter Lavinia is completely taken over by the color, and as the farm well erupts with colorful light, she vanishes with it into space. The events of the film are very similar to that of the short story written by Lovecraft. He describes this color as being something never before seen on the current color spectrum. Obviously, it's impossible to create a color that human beings have never seen before. Our eyes have small color receptors called cones, which interpret blues, reds, and greens. We can see the current color spectrum from the mixture of these three different colors into all the known colors. Stanley decided to use magenta to represent this indescribable color in the film. Because technically magenta does not have a wavelength, it does not exist on the color spectrum. Our brain interprets what we see as magenta when blue and red mix together evenly, but the brain filters out the green that lies between the two colors on the spectrum and substitutes it for this hybrid dark pinkish hue. Symbolically, it was the best choice to represent this new color. Like the alien from The Thing, we aren't able to gather much information about this strange sentient color. It never seems to have any describable shape other than just being a single color. It acts like a parasite, feeding off the people, animals, and plants on the farm, and eventually mutating them into something more hospitable for it. It seems to hail from a planet straight out of Lovecraftian lore. The world is teeming with writhing tentacles with this psychedelic color and atmosphere around everything. Unlike most other horror films and the two other films on this list, Color Out of Space is a very colorful and bright film. It utilizes a very saturated color palette that is not typically seen in most horror films, especially towards the end of the film. It becomes very unnaturally vibrant and neon with every color. It does a great job at making this vibrant color palette a harbinger of this Lovecraftian evil. Lovecraft cultivated this genre in horror literature, meaning it was quite easy to tell readers that these monsters were shapeless and indescribable. However, translating that into a visual medium like film is quite different. When you give a character a form, it anchors it down into this tangible design, something that we can comprehend. Thus, it undermines the purpose of cosmic horror. As the monster is something that the audience can understand, these monsters are a spectacle to us, something without any concrete answers. The more we get to see of these monsters, the less we understand them. Curiosity about the unknown. It's in our nature to question the universe and to desire an answer, to reach out to the things just outside of our grasp. But we are never meant to grasp them. They aren't for us. This universe isn't for us. And when we find ourselves reaching out past the limits of our existence, the universe will often remind us of our cosmic insignificance.